I never wanted much for my 69th birthday. A little piece, a warm slice of cake, maybe a phone call from my son Daniel. That was enough for me. You see, when you've lost the love of your life, birthdays don't feel like celebrations anymore. They feel quiet, still, like something's missing. I lost my husband 3 years ago. After that, I moved into a smaller house, grew tomatoes in the backyard, and joined a local book club. My days were simple, but they were mine. Daniel, my only child, had grown busier and busier. He stopped calling as often. When he did, his voice always sounded rushed, like I was just one more thing on his list. But still, I believed in him. I was his mother. That morning, I woke up early, put on my blue cardigan, the one my husband always said brought out my eyes, and made myself a cup of tea. I even set the table for 2, just in case Daniel showed up. Hours passed. I read a few chapters, watered the garden, and waited. At around 4 p.m., I heard a car pull into the driveway. My heart did that little flutter it always does when he comes home. I opened the door with a smile, and there he was, tall, handsome, neatly dressed. My son. But something was off. He didn't bring flowers, or cake, or even a card. Instead, he held a manila folder under his arm, like it was more important than anything else. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, giving me a quick hug that felt distant. Then, he walked in like he owned the place. I tried not to let it hurt. I asked if he wanted tea. He said no. He sat down at the table and placed the folder between us. That's when he said something I'll never forget. "I wanted to talk to you about your future," he said. "Your assets, your will." I blinked. "My will?" He smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile people wear when they've already decided something for you. "I've been speaking with a financial advisor on that," he said, "just making sure things are set up properly for when the time comes." When the time comes. That's what he said. It was my birthday, my 69th birthday, and my son was talking about my death like it was a meeting on his calendar. I tried to laugh it off, to change the subject. I asked him if he remembered when his dad turned 70, and we surprised him with a homemade lemon cake. Daniel barely responded. His eyes stayed on the folder. "You should sign these," he said. "It'll make everything easier. For everyone." He pushed the folder toward me. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at it. My hands, which had once buttoned his tiny shirts, now shook as they hovered over legal papers I didn't ask for. That's when it hit me. This birthday wasn't about me. It was about my money. And my son had a plan I wasn't part of. Have you ever felt like someone close to you changed when money got involved? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one, and if you believe no one should be taken for granted, especially by family, please hit that subscribe button. This story isn't over, not by a long shot. Because next, I found out those papers weren't just suggestions. They were a trap. When Daniel left that evening, I didn't touch the folder. I just sat there staring at it, the gold light from the kitchen lamp shining over the word authorization. It didn't feel right. My birthday cake sat untouched on the counter. The frosting had started to melt, and a single candle leaned to the side, like it was tired of standing. So was I. Later that night, I made myself open the folder. Inside were documents with my name printed neatly on every page. Margaret Collins, as if it were already signed, sealed, and done. It said, "Power of Attorney." I had seen those words before. My husband and I once signed one together when he got sick. But this one was different. It didn't protect me. It gave Daniel full control. over everything. My savings, my property, even the right to decide where I lived. My stomach turned. I closed the folder and pushed it away. I wanted to believe it was a mistake. Maybe some formality he didn't understand. He was my son, after all. But the next morning, I started remembering things. Little moments I had brushed off before. Like how Daniel had insisted last year that I switch my bank account to online access so he could help me manage it. Or how he had asked for my social security number just to update the tax forms. Each memory cut a little deeper. Later that day, the phone rang. It was Daniel. "Mom, did you look at the papers?" he asked. I said yes. He sighed, the way people do when they think they're dealing with a child. "Mom, it's for your safety," he said. "If anything happens, I'll be able to handle things quickly. You won't have to worry." But I was worried. Not about dying, about being erased while I was still alive. I told him I wanted to talk to someone before signing. He paused. His voice dropped lower. "Who? A lawyer? Mom, don't do that. It'll just confuse things." Confuse things. That was the moment I heard the tone in his voice. The same one he used when he scolded his son, my little grandson, for spilling juice. Cold. Dismissive. When we hung up, I sat in silence, and then I heard it. A faint whisper coming from the hallway. I followed the sound, and realized I had left my phone on speaker earlier when Daniel called. I picked it up, and the line was still open. I heard Daniel's voice again, but now he was talking to someone else. "She's getting old," he said. "She doesn't even understand what these papers mean. We'll make her sign it soon." My heart pounded. Then I heard a woman's voice. His wife, Olivia. "She'll thank us later," she said, laughing softly. "She's had her turn. It's our time now." That was enough. I ended the call, set the phone down, and pressed my shaking hands together. For the first time in my life, I was afraid of my own child. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound in the house felt louder, every shadow sharper. In the morning, I looked at the folder again. But this time, I wasn't scared. I was angry. He thought I was weak. He thought I wouldn't notice. He thought I'd just sign and smile. He didn't know who raised him. The next afternoon, I went to the small wooden box my husband had left me before he passed. Inside were some old letters, our wedding rings, and the key to a safe deposit box I hadn't opened in years. I didn't know what I'd find, but something inside me whispered to check. I grabbed my coat and drove to the bank. The woman at the counter recognized me. "It's been a long time, Mrs. Collins," she said kindly. When I opened that safe box, I found documents, old financial records, property deeds, insurance details, and tucked in the corner, a letter. It was in my husband's handwriting. "If anything ever feels wrong," it said, "trust your instinct. People change when they smell money. Keep copies of everything. Protect ourself." I sat there, tears running down my face. My husband had always known the world could turn cruel, but I never thought it would happen inside my own family. As I locked the box again, I knew I had to act carefully. I needed help, but I couldn't let Daniel know. That evening, I called my old friend May. She was sharp, loyal, and tough as nails. When I told her everything, she went quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Don't you dare sign those papers, Maggie. Not until we get a lawyer." Her words steadied me. For the first time in days, I felt a small spark of control. But Daniel wasn't going to wait quietly. The next morning, he showed up at my door, unannounced. He smiled, holding a pen this time. Ready to get this over with, Mom? He asked. I smiled back. My hands were calm, but inside, my heart raced. Not today, dear, I said softly. I think I'll have someone else take a look first. His eyes narrowed. You don't trust me? I met his gaze. I trust you, Daniel. I just don't trust what you're doing. He didn't say anything after that. He just turned around, slammed the door, and left. I stood there, my hands trembling, my heart heavy. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't over. It was just beginning. I stared at the screen, my heart beating hard in my chest. The bank account I used for groceries, for small bills, completely drained. Gone. Only a 2017 balance sat there like an insult. And I hadn't touched it in weeks. That's when I knew. Daniel wasn't waiting for me to sign. He was already moving ahead, like he owned my life. But he forgot one thing. I may be 69, but I remember everything. The next morning, I pulled out every old file I had. My husband had taught me to keep copies of everything. He was careful like that. He always said, "Keep the fine print, Maggie. It's where the truth hides." So I opened the bottom drawer of the cabinet no one ever looked at, not even Daniel. Birth certificates, tax forms, insurance plans, deeds, bank statements going back years. And tucked in a brown envelope, I found what I needed: the original deed to this house. My name, only mine. No cosigner, no shared ownership, no transfer. I sat back in my chair and exhaled, slow and deep. He hadn't gotten to this, not yet. But I knew I had to move fast. I called May again. She came over within the hour, holding 2 large coffees and that determined look she always had when someone crossed a line. I showed her everything: the empty account, the power of attorney folder, the deed. She listened quietly. Then she said, "We need a lawyer, a good one." And she knew just who to call. Mr. Lawson. He was retired mostly, but he had helped my husband years ago with some land paperwork, and May said he still did the occasional case for friends. When he arrived the next day, he looked at me kindly and said, "You don't look confused to me, Mrs. Collins." That made me smile a little. I handed him the documents Daniel had given me. He went quiet for a long while. Then he looked up and said, "This isn't protection. This is a takeover." We sat together at my kitchen table as he laid it all out. "If you had signed this," he said, "your son would have had the right to sell this house, close your accounts, even move you into a nursing home against your will, all without asking you first." I felt sick. He folded his hands. "Has he done anything else you haven't told me?" I paused. Then I told him about the empty account. He nodded slowly. "We need to check for forged documents. If he's already signed anything in your name, that's a crime. But we have to be careful. You're not just protecting your money, you're protecting your independence." My throat tightened. That word, independence. I had already lost so much: my husband, my full strength, my place in my son's heart. I wasn't going to lose my freedom too. The next few days were quiet, but tense. Daniel didn't call. He didn't visit. But I could feel it, like a storm, sitting just behind the clouds. I noticed small things: how my mail started arriving later, how my internet suddenly dropped for a full day, how someone had called the pharmacy pretending to update my insurance. He was poking at the edges of my life, testing how far he could go. One night, I sat in my living room holding the letter my husband left in that safe box. People change when they smell money. Those words kept echoing. I remembered Daniel as a boy, how he used to hold my hand when we crossed the street, how he cried when he lost his first tooth, how he once saved up birthday money to buy me a small locket. Where had that boy gone? When did I stop being Mom and start being just a source? The next morning, Mr. Lawson returned with papers of his own. These, he said, revoke anything he might try to use. They reestablish your sole legal authority, and we're filing a fraud alert on your accounts immediately. I signed every page with a steady hand. He looked up at me and said, I'll also be recording these with the county, so if he tries anything with property transfers, we'll know. A quiet power settled in my chest. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was fighting back. That night, I sat with May and we drank tea by the window. She asked me, Are you scared? I nodded, but I also said, I'm not alone. That mattered more than anything. Then, just as we were putting the dishes away, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel, just one line. We need to talk. Tomorrow. No more games. I read it twice. My hands trembled. He was coming back. And this time, I knew he wouldn't come with a smile. And when he walked through my door the next day, he wasn't holding a folder anymore. He was holding a pen and a notary. He thought he'd win, but I had signed something else. Daniel showed up the next day just like he said, but he wasn't alone. A woman stood beside him, young, dressed in gray, holding a clipboard. Daniel smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Hi, Mom, he said. This is Janice. She's a mobile notary. We're going to get the paperwork done today, so everything's taken care of. Just like that. No, how are you? No, are you feeling okay? No birthday wishes from the other day. Just business. I glanced at the notary, then at Daniel. I told you I needed time, I said softly. Daniel laughed. Mom, come on. It's been days. Why drag this out? I'm doing this for your own good. That sentence, it stopped me cold. Your own good. That's what people say before they take your choices away. I sat down calmly. Daniel, I said, can you explain what these papers are? Just so I'm clear. He sighed, like I was being difficult. They're just the same as before. Basic power of attorney. So I can help you manage things. Olivia and I have been talking, and we just want to make sure you're taken care of. I looked at the notary. She avoided my eyes. Then I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter. I have something too, I said. I opened a drawer and pulled out the folder Mr. Lawson had prepared. I already signed new documents, I told him. Legal ones, with a lawyer. They cancel anything you're trying to push on me. Daniel blinked. What? I spoke with Mr. Lawson, I said clearly. You remember him. He helped your father years ago. He reviewed everything and made sure I'm protected. The notary looked uncomfortable. Daniel's jaw tightened. Mom, you don't understand what you're doing, he said. He's confusing you. You're not thinking straight. That was it. I felt something burn inside my chest. Don't you dare, I said. My voice didn't shake. Don't you dare talk to me like I'm broken. I've lived through more than you've ever faced. I raised you. I buried my husband. I handled the bills, the house, the pain. I know exactly what I'm doing. The notary cleared her thigh, wrote, Mr. Collins, I can't witness anything today. Not if there's a legal dispute. I have to go. She stepped back, gathered her things, and left. Once she was gone, Daniel dropped the act. He looked at me with cold, narrow eyes. You're going to regret this, Mom. You're making everything harder for yourself. I held his stare. No, Daniel. I'm making it harder for you. He didn't slam the door this time. He just walked out, slowly. But the silence he left behind was loud. The next few days were tense. I changed my online passwords. I double-checked my bank activity. Mr. Lawson helped me file a fraud report for the emptied account. He also submitted a formal notice to freeze any property transfers. I felt like I was locking my doors in a storm, but I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry. One afternoon, Olivia came by. I didn't invite her in. She stood at my door in high heels and a tight smile. "We're really just trying to help, Margaret," she said. "Daniel is hurt. He's trying to do the right thing, but you're making it difficult." I didn't answer. She leaned in a little closer. "You know, this house is too much for you. Maybe it's time to think about other options." I folded my arms. "This house," I said, "was built with my husband's hands. I've lived here for 40 years. It's not too much for me. But your lies are." She rolled her eyes. "You don't have to be so emotional." I stared at her for a long second, and then, just as calmly, I said, "Get off my porch." She blinked, like no one had ever said that to her before. Then she turned around and walked away without another word. That evening, May and I sat outside as the sun set behind the trees. She looked at me, smiled, and said, "I'm proud of you, Maggie." I smiled back, but I felt tired, not just from the fight, but from the sadness of it all. This was my son, and yet, I didn't recognize the man he had become. I tried to sleep that night, but I couldn't. Around midnight, I got up and walked through the house. Room by room, I touched the walls, the shelves, the photos. This home had love and Eve, my corner, and I would protect it with everything I had. The next morning, Mr. Lawson called. "I just wanted to give you a heads up," he said. "Daniel filed something." "What kind of something?" I asked. "An emergency petition. He's claiming you're mentally unfit to manage your estate. He's trying to have you declared legally incapable. It's serious, but we'll be ready." My hands went cold. It was worse than I thought. This wasn't just about money anymore. He was trying to erase me while I was still alive. And soon, I'd have to face him in court. I never thought I'd find myself preparing for court at 69. But there I was, sitting with Mr. Lawson at my kitchen table, going over documents I never imagined needing. Daniel hadn't stopped. He'd filed an emergency petition saying I was mentally unfit, that I was confused, that I couldn't manage my own life anymore. He even included a false doctor's note, someone I hadn't seen in years, saying I had memory concerns. All lies. He wasn't just coming for my house or my money now. He was coming for me. Mr. Lawson stayed calm, like he always did. He said we'd counter with proof, bank records, testimony, a clean bill of health from my real doctor. But I knew the courtroom wasn't the scariest part. The scariest part was knowing your own son wanted you declared incapable, all so he could sign on your behalf. The night before the hearing, I sat in my bedroom holding the framed photo of Daniel as a child. 7 years old, missing teeth, eyes full of laughter. He used to beg me for extra bedtime stories. He once told his teacher I was a supermom, and now he wanted to lock me in a life I didn't choose. But I wasn't going down quietly. The next morning, I wore the pearl necklace my husband gave me on our 30th anniversary and the same blue cardigan I wore on my birthday because this time, I was showing up for me. May came with me. She held my hand in the elevator. "I'll be right here," she said. "You just tell your truth." And that's what I planned to do. When I walked into the courtroom, Daniel was already there. So was Olivia. Both dressed sharp, smug looks on their faces. Daniel barely looked at me. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Then it began. Daniel's lawyer spoke first. He painted a picture of a poor, aging woman who couldn't remember basic things. He said I had missed payments, that I was socially isolated, and increasingly erratic. I wanted to scream. but I stayed silent. Then they showed copies of the forged document Daniel had used to empty my account. He claimed I gave him permission. I could feel May squeezing my hand. Finally, the judge turned to me. "Mrs. Collins," she said gently, "would you like to respond?" I stood slowly. My legs shook, but my voice didn't. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, and I told her everything. How Daniel came on my birthday, not with cake or a hug, but with papers. How he said it was for my own good, while whispering behind my back. How I found the original deed, untouched. How I visited the bank, found the missing money. How I called my lawyer, took action, and then I turned to Daniel. "You are my son," I said. "I would have given you anything, if you had just asked with love. But you came with lies, and you tried to take the only thing I have left, my freedom." He looked down. For the first time, he couldn't meet my eyes. Mr. Lawson stood next. He laid out the timeline, the records, the official doctor's report confirming I had no mental impairments. He showed the judge the fraud report we'd filed, the revoked power of attorney, and the notary's statement. The courtroom was quiet. The judge looked at Daniel. "You submitted forged documents and attempted to take control of your mother's estate without her consent. That is not protection. That is exploitation." Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came out. And just like that, it was over. The judge denied Daniel's petition. She declared me fully competent and in control of my estate. She also referred the matter to the district attorney for investigation. Fraud, forgery, financial abuse. Daniel didn't just lose. He was now facing real consequences. Outside the courtroom, Daniel tried to speak. "Mom," but I raised my hand. "No," I said. "You lost the right to call me that when you treated me like a burden instead of a blessing." He stood there frozen, and for the first time, I walked away from him. Back at home, I sat on the porch with May. We watched the sun go down, sipping tea like we used to. The wind was gentle, my heart still heavy. She said, "You did it." I nodded, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like relief. Because now, I could breathe. I was safe. And I had signed something far more powerful than what Daniel ever brought. I had signed my name to my own strength. But I didn't know. Daniel had one more move left, and it would hit me right where it hurt the most. For a few days, it was quiet. No texts, no surprise visits. Just silence. I thought maybe it was over. Maybe Daniel had realized what he'd done. Maybe he felt ashamed. But I should have known better. My son didn't know how to lose. One afternoon, I went to pick up my mail, and something caught my eye. A large envelope, no return address. Inside, I found a letter from Daniel's attorney. He was appealing the judge's decision, claiming new evidence, saying I had pressured the notary into leaving. And worst of all, he wanted to place a lien on my house, my own son, trying to freeze the place I've called home for 40 years. I brought the letter inside, sat at the kitchen table, and let the anger settle. Not hot rage. No. It was a cold kind of fire. The kind that doesn't burn fast, but steady. Daniel was testing me again, trying to wear me down, but I had learned something in that courtroom. You don't give a bully your tears, you give them boundaries. So I picked up the phone, called Mr. Lawson. He was already on it. "That lien won't hold," he said. "We'll file an injunction tomorrow." But then he paused. "There's something else, Margaret," he added. He had found out that Daniel had accessed another account, a shared account I'd forgotten about. One my husband and I had opened years ago, back when we were saving for Daniel's college. There had been just under $15,000 left in it. Now, zero. My hands went numb. That money had sat untouched for decades. I'd left it there as a kind of memory, a quiet gift, maybe for Daniel's son one day. But now, it was gone. No warning, no thank you, just stolen. Later that night, I heard a knock. Not on the front door, on the side gate. I peeked through the curtain. It was Daniel, alone. I almost didn't answer. But something in me needed to see what kind of man he'd become. I opened the door just wide enough. He looked tired, angry, not sorry, just frustrated. "You happy now?" he asked. "You made me look like a criminal." I blinked. "You did that to yourself," I said. He ran a hand through his hair. "I was just trying to help. You're living in a fantasy if you think you can handle everything alone." I crossed my arms. "I handled diapers, fevers, your homework, the funeral, the mortgage, and every storm this house ever saw, alone. I think I'll manage, Daniel." He didn't like that. His face twisted, and then he said something I'll never forget. "You know what? Maybe you do belong in this old house, rotting away with your dead memories." That was it. I closed the door, locked it, and I knew I was done trying to save the boy I once knew. The next morning, I made a new decision. If Daniel wanted consequences, he would get them. Mr. Lawson helped me file a financial abuse report with Adult Protective Services. We also submitted a fraud complaint to the bank regarding the drained college account. And then, I made one more call. To my granddaughter, Daniel's daughter. She was 19, a quiet girl, but kind. We hadn't spoken in months. Daniel had stopped bringing her around, but I asked if we could meet. She said yes. We met at the little cafe near the library. She looked nervous. "Is Dad mad I'm here?" she asked. I told her gently, "This isn't about your dad. This is about truth." I didn't give her all the details, just enough. I told her I loved her, always would, and that no matter what happened between me and her father, my door would always be open to her. She teared up. "He said you didn't want to see me anymore," she whispered. That nearly broke me. "He lied," I said, "but you don't have to carry his mistakes." We hugged, and for the first time in weeks, my heart felt something soft again. The next few days moved quickly. Mr. Lawson submitted everything to the DA's office. We froze Daniel's access to every shared account. The lien was removed. And Daniel? He was served a notice. A formal investigation was now underway. He wanted control. Now he'd face accountability. May stopped by the next morning with fresh biscuits. She sat at my kitchen table and smiled. "You didn't just protect your house, Maggie," she said. "You protected your dignity." I nodded slowly. But I also knew this wasn't about victory. It was about drawing a line. A line that said, "You don't get to mistreat me just because I'm older. You don't get to call it love when it feels like control." I sat by the window that night, sipping tea in the silence. And I realized something. Daniel might have taken money. He might have tried to take my voice, but I still had something he never expected. Proof, witnesses, a paper trail. And soon, the courts would have it too. Because when the hearing date arrived again, I wasn't showing up alone. I brought the one thing Daniel never counted on, Rec, Alibes, and the truth. Courtroom, round 2. But this time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt ready. When I stepped inside, I wasn't the same woman from before. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a fighter, a witness, a woman holding the truth in her hands. Daniel was already seated when I arrived. His face was pale. No Olivia beside him this time. Just him. Alone. Maybe because things had started catching up with him. The fraud report, the frozen accounts, the subpoena for the college fund transfer, and the official investigation now tied to his name. Mr. Lawson placed the folder gently in front of me. "Remember," he said, "you don't have to shout. The truth speaks loud enough." The judge entered. Everyone stood. And so it began. Daniel's lawyer started again, like before. Only this time, his voice didn't carry as much weight. He repeated the same story. That I was slipping. That I was being influenced. That I was emotional and confused. They showed the same tired claim, that I was making rash decisions. And then they dared to say, "She's not thinking clearly. She's being manipulated by a retired lawyer and a nosy neighbor." May, who was sitting in the front row, let out a little snort. I almost smiled. Then it was our turn. Mr. Lawson stood and walked slowly to the center of the room. "Your Honor," he said, calm and direct, "what you're about to see is not a case of confusion. It's a case of calculation and courage." He handed over a stack of documents, one by one. Receipts, bank statements, voice transcripts, notarized letters, photos of the empty college account, before and after, screenshots of Daniel's messages about my condition. Even the recording May helped me collect from the phone line that stayed connected by accident. Daniel's voice, loud and clear. "She's old. We'll make her sign it." The courtroom went still. Daniel's lawyer looked panicked. The judge raised her eyebrows, and then turned to me. "Mrs. Collins," she said, "would you like to speak?" I stood, slowly, holding a photo of my husband and me from years ago. I looked at Daniel, then at the judge, and I said, "I may be old, but I am not broken. I raised a child, ran a home, buried the man I loved, and kept this roof over my head through thick and thin. And when my son came to take what wasn't his, not just my money, but my voice, I stood up." My voice trembled, but it didn't crack. I didn't bring anger, I brought truth. I didn't bring drama, I brought proof. "You called me confused, Daniel, but I'm more clear now than I've ever been." The judge nodded. "I've heard enough," she said. She looked directly at Daniel. "Mr. Collins, the evidence shows a pattern of manipulation, dishonesty, and financial misconduct. Your actions were not in your mother's best interest. They were in your own." She paused. "I am not only dismissing this petition with prejudice, meaning you may not file it again, but I'm also referring your actions to the district attorney for criminal review." You could hear a pin drop. Daniel didn't say a word. He didn't even look up. The judge turned back to me. "Mrs. Collins," she said, "you are fully restored in every legal and financial capacity. And may I say, thank you for reminding this court what real strength looks like." I didn't cry. Not yet. But as I walked out of that courtroom, with May on one side and Mr. Lawson on the other, I felt something powerful. Not pride. Peace. Outside, reporters were waiting. Apparently, someone tipped them off. They asked questions, wanted sound bites. I didn't give any. All I said was, "No one is too old to fight for themselves." Later that night, I sat alone on my porch. The wind was soft, the sky quiet. I thought about everything I'd lost, and everything I still had. My home, my name, my story. Daniel didn't call. He did, right. But I heard from his daughter the next day. A simple message. "I'm proud of you, Grandma." And that was enough. But the truth is, this wasn't the end. Because Daniel had one last move to play. Not in court, not through lawyers. This time, it came in the form of a letter. And when I read it, I felt a pain deeper than anything the courts could deliver. A week after the courtroom victory, I thought it was finally over. No more lawyers, no more battles, just healing. But I was wrong. Because one morning, as I was folding laundry, a white envelope slid through the mail slot. No name on the front, just a return address I didn't recognize. I opened it without thinking, and inside was a handwritten letter from Daniel. The handwriting was still the same, loopy and fast, like he never learned to slow down. It started like this. Mom, if you're reading this, it means I've lost everything, and you've won. I hope you're happy. My chest tightened. I sat down at the kitchen table, the letter shaking in my hands. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just thought if I got the money, things would finally feel easy. I'm drowning in debt. Olivia's leaving. I messed everything up. There it was. The truth, tucked between bitterness and broken sentences. Not sorry. Not really. Just defeated. You always loved the house more than me anyway. That line hit hard. Because it wasn't true. I loved that house because of who filled it. Because of the memories we made in it. Because it was where I held his hand when he had nightmares. Where I taught him to ride a bike in the driveway. Where we baked his birthday cakes year after year. It wasn't the house I protected. It was my dignity. But the part that hurt most came at the end. You told me I lost the right to call you Mom. Fine. I won't call again. Enjoy your little victory. There was no signature. Just a blank space where his name used to belong. It felt like a goodbye, but not the kind you prepare for. It was sharp, final, empty. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because I needed the reminder that sometimes the people we love are the ones who cut us deepest. May came by later that day. I showed her the letter. She read it silently, then looked at me. Do you believe any of it? She asked. I thought for a long time, and finally said, some of it. The pain, maybe. The panic. But the cruelty? That came from a choice. One he made over and over again. A few days later, I got another letter. But this one wasn't from Daniel. It was from the district attorney's office. They had officially opened a case for elder financial abuse. The investigation would continue, quietly but seriously. I didn't feel joy when I read it. Just a soft wave of justice rising, slowly but surely. Daniel had wanted control. He got consequences instead. I went outside and stood in the garden, letting the wind move through my hair. The tomatoes were ripening, the bees were humming, and for a moment, I let myself feel proud. Not because I won, but because I didn't let myself disappear. You see, when the judge looked at Daniel, he didn't see a son trying to protect his mother. He saw a man using age as an excuse, using love as a weapon, and using lies to get ahead. That's not family. That's theft. I called my granddaughter later that evening. We talked for an hour about school, books, her part-time job at the bakery. Then she asked, "Do you think you'll ever forgive him?" I didn't answer right away, because the truth is, I didn't know. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's not about pretending it didn't hurt. Sometimes it's about letting yourself move forward, without dragging their weight behind you. Maybe one day, maybe not. But for now, I told her this. I forgive myself for loving him too blindly, for waiting too long to say no. That's where I'll start. She smiled through the phone. That's on. Oh, Grandma. And maybe it was. That night, I opened the drawer again, looked at the letter one more time, then I tucked it beneath a folder of legal papers. Because Daniel may have said goodbye, but this story wasn't finished. There was one more decision I had to make. One final signature. And it would change everything. Not for Daniel, but for someone who truly deserved it. I spent most of my life putting others first. That's what mothers do, don't they? We hold our breath so our children can breathe easier. But after everything Daniel did, I finally understood something. If you let people write your story, you don't get to choose how it ends. So this time, I picked up the pen. It started small. I cleaned out old drawers, shredded papers that didn't matter. I kept the ones that did. My deed, my will, my life insurance papers. And then I opened a blank notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "My life," in my own words. Because if I stayed silent any longer, I'd disappear. May encouraged me to go to the senior center one evening. They were having a speaker, someone from a local nonprofit that helps older adults with legal rights and independence. I almost didn't go, but something in me said, "Show up." So I did. And as I sat in that room, surrounded by women who looked like me, women who'd been ignored, used, pushed aside, I realized something powerful. I wasn't the only one. After the speaker finished, they asked if anyone wanted to share. I raised my hand. My voice was quiet at first, but steady. "I'm Margaret," I said. "I just turned 69. My son tried to take everything I built, but I said no. And now I'm here." There was silence. Then someone clapped. Then more. One woman came up afterward and said, "My nephew's doing the same thing to my sister. I didn't know what to do. But now, I do." That night, I didn't feel broken. I felt seen. Over the next few weeks, I spoke at 3 more events. Mr. Lawson even introduced me to someone who worked with lawmakers. They asked if I'd be willing to share my story in a hearing about elder abuse protections. I said yes. Because if my pain could help someone else stop theirs, then it was worth it. Back home, I started planting again. Tomatoes, peppers, basil. Something about watching life grow. It reminded me that not everything dies after pain. Some things bloom right through it. One morning, I got a knock at the door. It was my granddaughter. No warning, no text, just her, standing there with a box of lemon muffins and a nervous smile. "Can I come in?" she asked. I opened the door wide. She sat at the table, looked around and said, "It still smells like you." That nearly broke me. She told me she was moving out of her parents' place. "They don't talk much anymore," she said, "but I want to be better than what I saw." I nodded slowly. "You already are," I told her. We spent the afternoon sorting through old photos. She asked questions about her grandfather, about what Daniel was like as a boy. I answered them honestly. The good memories didn't disappear. They just lived beside the hard ones now. That's how life works. It's not either or. It's all of it together. Later that night, I pulled out my will, the same one Daniel had tried to rewrite. I crossed out his name. With a calm hand, I added hers. And then I added a note. To my granddaughter, you saw me. You stood by me. You carry our family's kindness forward. This home is yours now. I signed it with steady ink. Not out of revenge, but out of peace. The next morning, May called with excitement in her voice. "Guess what?" she said. Our story had been picked up by a local newspaper. They wanted to run a feature on women standing up against elder abuse. "Margaret, they're calling you the face of quiet strength." I laughed. "Quiet strength," I said. "That's the nicest way anyone's ever called me stubborn." But I liked the sound of it, because strength doesn't always look like shouting or fists. Sometimes it looks like a woman using to sign the wrong paper. It looks like a grandmother planting tomatoes while the world moves on. It looks like choosing to live, even after someone tried to shrink you. I sat on the porch that evening, the sun warm against my skin, and I let myself feel everything. The sadness, the anger, the loss, but also the pride. Because I didn't let it break me. I didn't bury my pain in silence this time. I turned it into a legacy. And I still had one more thing to leave behind, a final goodbye. In my own words, I always thought I'd spend my final years fading into the background, softer, quieter, waiting for someone to remember I was still here. But that's not how my story ends. Because I didn't fade. I rose. After I changed my will, something inside me settled. Like the ground had stopped shaking. I wasn't afraid of what Daniel might do anymore. He didn't hold that power. And truthfully, I didn't hate him. I just didn't trust him. And trust, once broken, doesn't rebuild with an apology. It rebuilds with actions. Actions he never took. So I focused on the life still in front of me. I joined a writing group, started teaching a free class at the senior center called Know Your Rights. It was just 5 women at first, but the second week, 10 showed up. By the third week, we had to borrow extra chairs. And the stories they shared, they broke my heart. Mothers being ignored, grandmothers being tricked, sisters being silenced, all of them thinking they were alone, just like I did. One day, a woman named Dolores pulled me aside after class. She said, "Your story gave me the courage to tell my son no, for the first time in my life." I hugged her, and I thought, if my pain saved one person from walking the path I walked, then every sleepless night was worth it. My granddaughter started visiting every Sunday. She helped me paint the back fence. We baked together. Sometimes we didn't talk about Daniel at all. Sometimes we did. She told me he'd moved out of town, lost his job, that Olivia filed for divorce. I didn't feel joy hearing it. Just a quiet sadness. Because broken people keep breaking others when they won't face themselves. I told her, "You get to choose your legacy, just like I had to choose mine." And one evening, I handed her a letter. Not the kind Daniel sent me, but a real letter. Inside, I wrote everything I had wanted someone to say to me when I was younger. "You are not a burden. You are not too much, and you are never too late to begin again." She cried when she read it. So did I. A few months later, I sold the house. Yes, the house I fought so hard to keep. Not because I gave up, but because I was ready to move forward on my own terms. I bought a small cottage by the sea. Nothing fancy, just windows full of light and the sound of waves at night. Peace has a sound, you know, and mine finally returned. On my 70th birthday, May threw me a little party at the senior center. Nothing big, just lemon cake, music, and a group of women who had walked through their own fire. They surprised me with a gift, a plaque that read, "She took back everything." I laughed. But then I touched the words, and my hands shook. Because they were true. I took back my home, my name, my story, my worth. Daniel never reached out again. And that's okay. Some people are chapters, not the whole book. And this book? It's not about what he took. It's about what I reclaimed. So now I sit by the sea, the wind in my hair, a mug of tea in my hand. And I think about all the women like me, the ones who gave and gave and gave, until someone tried to write them off. I see you, and I want you to know, you are not invisible, you are not confused, you are not too late. You are the author of your story, and sometimes the best revenge isn't anger or shouting, it's choosing yourself, quietly, boldly. Finally, I'm Margaret Collins, and I didn't let my son steal my ending. I wrote my own. Have you ever had to choose between family and your own dignity? Tell me in the comments. Your story deserves to be heard.